The wealthy rancher lounged in the smoky back room of a saloon, his friends teasing him relentlessly about his next gamble, and he grinned, accepting a challenge that would set the tone for the coming night. He would spend the evening with the widow who had recently moved to town, a woman whose beauty and quiet dignity had already sparked endless rumors. She was known for keeping her life private, never attending social gatherings, and speaking only when necessary, which only fueled the men's curiosity and their dare. That afternoon, the rancher rode out to her modest home, a grand yet solitary figure on horseback, and found her standing in the doorway, poised yet wary, a flicker of suspicion in her eyes as she measured him. He introduced the wager, lightly masking his intentions with charm and humor, but the widow's sharp mind recognized the risk and the trap. Still, circumstances combined with subtle pressure and her own practical need to maintain appearances in the town left her little choice but to acquiesce. As he escorted her to his sprawling estate, the tension between them was palpable, each step measured, each glance loaded with unspoken challenge and curiosity. Inside the grand house, with candlelight flickering against wooden beams and storm clouds gathering on the horizon, they settled for dinner, exchanging polite but pointed conversation that revealed glimpses of their true selves while keeping their defenses intact. The rancher found himself intrigued by the widow's quiet confidence, the way she held herself with grace yet guarded her heart behind carefully chosen words. She in turn studied him, recognizing the arrogance beneath the charm, but also detecting flashes of something more, a curiosity, a vulnerability that hinted at depths he rarely showed. As the evening wore on and shadows danced across the walls, neither could ignore the magnetic pull between them, a connection born of tension, mystery, and the thrill of the unknown, setting the stage for a night that promised both deception and revelation, and leaving both aware that by morning nothing would be quite as it seemed. The ride to the ranch was quiet at first, the only sounds the soft rhythm of hooves against the dirt road and the occasional rustle of wind through the trees, yet beneath the calm tension simmered between the rancher and the widow. He stole glances at her, noting the way her eyes shifted, alert and discerning, and the faint tremor in her hands that betrayed a mix of apprehension and determination, while she studied him in return, measuring his demeanor, trying to read beyond the playful confidence he projected. As the sprawling estate came into view, its wooden beams and wide porches silhouetted against the darkening sky, the widow felt a pang of intimidation, aware of the vast difference between their worlds. Yet something about the way he guided her, protective yet non-intrusive, gave her a strange sense of safety she had not expected. Inside, the grand parlor was warm and welcoming, a stark contrast to the storm clouds gathering outside, but it also amplified the quiet intensity between them. The flickering candlelight cast shadows that seemed to dance across the walls, mimicking the unspoken tension in the room. The rancher led her to a comfortable chair by the hearth, offering tea with a courteous bow, a gesture both polite and disarming, and she accepted, curious despite herself. Conversation began cautiously, each probing the other with veiled questions, the widow revealing hints of her past in stories, carefully chosen to share truth without surrendering vulnerability, while the rancher responded with measured humor, teasing yet attentive, showing glimpses of a depth beneath the surface bravado. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, tapping against the windows and emphasizing their isolation, forcing them to remain together, each aware of the silent, magnetic pull drawing them closer. In the warmth of the room, amid laughter and moments of honest glance, they discovered a shared rhythm, a subtle acknowledgement that this night, born of challenge and wager, might unravel more than just curiosity. It could uncover emotions and truths that neither had anticipated, leaving both aware that the evening was only beginning, and the storm outside was mirrored by a storm of intrigue and undeniable attraction growing quietly, steadily between them. As the night deepened, the playful tension between the rancher and the widow shifted into a delicate, unspoken game, each testing boundaries with subtle questions and carefully measured compliments, neither willing to give away too much of themselves, yet unable to resist the magnetic pull growing between them. Seated by the flickering fire, they exchanged stories that were half-truths, half-guarded confessions, revealing glimpses of their pasts without ever exposing the full depth of their experiences. The widow spoke of losses she had endured, her words tinged with sorrow yet delivered with remarkable composure, while the rancher responded with tales of reckless ventures and past mistakes, his charm barely concealing the vulnerability he rarely allowed anyone to see. Every glance, every small gesture, the tilt of her head, the brush of his hand as he passed a dish, the fleeting smiles that lingered too long added layers to their connection, a tension that was as thrilling as it was unnerving. The storm outside raged on, rain lashing against the windows and wind rattling the shutters, creating an intimate cocoon in which nothing existed beyond the two of them, and the isolation forced moments of quiet reflection, where each realized the other was more than the surface persona presented to the world. Amid laughter and sharp retorts, the widow caught herself intrigued by the rancher's unexpected attentiveness, noticing that behind the bravado and the teasing challenge lay a man capable of sensitivity, and the rancher in turn found himself captivated by her intelligence, grace, and the subtle strength she wielded even in the face of vulnerability. The air seemed charged with possibility, and though both tried to maintain composure, there were fleeting moments, shared glances, a hand resting just a second too long on a chair, the brush of a shoulder that spoke louder than words, hinting at the desire and curiosity each felt but neither dared to name. By the time the evening wore on, both were aware that the night had taken on a life of its own, that the wager that had started as a jest was evolving into something far more complicated, something that neither could predict or control, and that every unspoken word and lingering glance was drawing them deeper into a connection that promised danger, intrigue, and the possibility of a passion neither expected but could no longer deny. As the evening wore on, the storm outside intensified, rain hammering against the windows and thunder rolling across the horizon, mirroring the growing emotional tempest inside the ranch house. The widow, who had maintained a careful balance of poise and guardedness, found herself reluctantly letting her guard slip when the firelight flickered across the room, casting warm, intimate shadows on the walls. She shared a story from her past, a quiet tragedy that had shaped her, speaking with measured honesty but enough vulnerability to reveal the human beneath the composed exterior, and for the first time, the rancher saw her not as a challenge or a prize, but as a person of depth, courage, and quiet strength. The rancher, too, felt the stirrings of something unfamiliar. His usual bravado and playful arrogance gave way to an unexpected tenderness as he listened, leaning forward slightly, his voice softer, his humor tinged with genuine interest rather than jest. The space between them seemed charged, each gesture carrying weight, the way her hand brushed against hers as she reached for the teacup, the brief, unintentional meeting of their eyes, the subtle incline of his body as he subtly closed the distance without intruding. For all the outward calm, both were aware of the magnetic pull growing between them, a connection born of curiosity, attraction, and the thrill of unspoken truths. The widow sensed it too, a stirring of emotion she had carefully kept hidden, a blend of wariness and fascination that conflicted with her natural caution, while the rancher wrestled with the realization that this night was no longer a mere wager or game. It was a collision of past wounds, present desires, and possibilities that neither had expected. Every shared glance, every soft-spoken word, every flicker of firelight seemed to pull them closer into a shared orbit, creating a delicate tension that was thrilling yet dangerous, intimate yet uncertain. By the time the storm reached its crescendo outside, both felt the weight of what was happening between them, an undeniable awareness that the night was changing them in ways neither could control, and that the emotional currents swirling within the house were as powerful and unpredictable as the storm that raged beyond its walls, setting the stage for revelations and consequences neither could foresee, but both were now powerless to resist. The storm outside had reached a furious pitch, lightning illuminating the parlor in brief, stark flashes, when the moment of truth arrived, unbidden and unavoidable. In the midst of their growing intimacy, as laughter and soft conversation lulled them into a false sense of ease, the widow moved to adjust her hair, and in a sudden inadvertent slip her wig fell away, revealing the secret she had so carefully concealed. The rancher froze instantly, the warmth of the night replaced by a sharp, electrifying shock as his mind raced to process what he was seeing. This was not the woman he thought he knew, the poised widow with soft words and guarded eyes, but someone far different, someone whose identity carried a history and significance he had never anticipated, and in that single heart-stopping moment the playful game and the casual bet dissolved into a tension neither could ignore. The widow, mortified yet defiant, quickly tried to reclaim her composure, placing her wig back in place and masking her embarrassment behind a thin veil of calm, but the rancher's reaction had already betrayed the depth of her revelation. His gaze lingered, searching her face for answers, his mind spinning with questions and the sudden gravity of the situation. For him, it was a collision of shock, fascination, and the unexpected stirring of deeper emotions, admiration, attraction, and a dawning respect for her resilience and courage in hiding such a truth from the world. For her, the moment was one of vulnerability and revelation, a test of whether the man who had treated her as a challenge, as a prize to be won, could see beyond appearances and recognize the person beneath the carefully constructed facade. Silence fell between them, heavy and charged, punctuated only by the wind's howl outside and the quiet crackle of the fire. Every unspoken thought, every racing heartbeat, spoke volumes as the rancher struggled to reconcile his initial intentions with the sudden gravity of the truth, realizing that the night was no longer about a bet or flirtation, but about trust, understanding, and a fragile, electric connection forming between them. In that instant, both understood that nothing could ever be the same again, that this revelation had shifted the rules entirely, and that the journey ahead would demand honesty, courage, and a willingness to confront emotions they had long kept buried. The revelation of the widow's secret hung heavily in the room, thickening the air with tension and uncertainty as both struggled to navigate the aftermath of what had just occurred. The rancher, still processing the shock, felt a whirlwind of conflicting emotions: surprise, curiosity, guilt for having treated the evening as a mere game, and a growing, undeniable admiration for the strength and composure she had shown despite such vulnerability. He paced the room briefly, running his hands through his hair, then stopped, finally meeting her gaze with a seriousness that replaced the playful arrogance he had carried all night. The widow, meanwhile, attempted to mask her embarrassment, standing tall but aware that her carefully maintained defenses had been breached, leaving her exposed not only to him but also to the raw possibility of emotional connection. Words were exchanged cautiously at first, clipped and deliberate, each trying to assert control over the swirling emotions between them. Yet every glance, every hesitation, betrayed more than either wanted to admit. She questioned his intentions, her voice steady yet tinged with underlying suspicion, demanding to know whether the night had ever been about her as a person or merely about a reckless bet. The rancher, humbled and earnest, confessed that the wager had started in jest, but that something unexpected had emerged, a fascination with her courage, her dignity, and the intelligence she had concealed beneath her carefully curated appearance. Their conversation was a delicate dance, each carefully navigating pride, fear, and the spark of attraction that neither could deny, with the storm outside serving as a relentless reminder of the intensity inside. Moments of silence punctuated their exchange, heavy with unspoken questions and the fragile possibility of trust. By the end of the night, Both were aware that while the immediate thrill of the evening had passed, what remained was far more complex, a tension that was equal parts emotional, intellectual, and undeniable physical chemistry. They retreated for the night with an unspoken agreement. The game was over, but the connection had only begun, a fragile bond built on shock, revelation, and the tentative beginnings of mutual respect and intrigue, leaving both to wonder how or if they could navigate the uncertain path that now stretched before them. Morning brought clarity, but also the weight of unspoken emotions lingering from the previous night as the rancher awoke with a resolve he hadn't known he possessed, determined to make amends for the recklessness of his wager and the way he had treated the widow. He sought her out, finding her in the parlor, her posture still guarded, but her eyes betraying curiosity and wariness, and he approached with a humility that replaced his usual bravado, his voice steady yet sincere. He acknowledged the foolishness of the bet, confessing that what had begun as a game had unexpectedly stirred feelings. He could no longer ignore feelings that demanded honesty, respect, and the willingness to see her as more than a challenge or prize. The widow, though cautious, observed the sincerity in his gaze, noticing the tension in his hands and the subtle shifts in his posture that spoke louder than any words, signaling that the man who had so casually teased and charmed her the night before was capable of genuine care and vulnerability. They spoke at length, navigating the fragile terrain of trust and forgiveness, their conversation a delicate mix of questions, admissions, and tentative laughter, each revelation peeling away the layers of pride, fear, and misconception that had kept them apart. As they moved through the morning together, small gestures, offering tea, adjusting a blanket, sharing a quiet smile, became acts of connection, evidence of a growing bond that was no longer defined by deception, but by mutual understanding and the slow building of emotional intimacy. The widow, sensing his sincerity and recognizing her own unexpected feelings, allowed herself to soften, letting a flicker of hope replace the caution that had long defined her interactions with men. The rancher, in turn, felt a burgeoning admiration and respect for her strength, her intelligence, and the grace with which she had navigated both the wager and the revelation of her secret. By the time the sun broke through the storm clouds, illuminating the ranch in golden light, both understood that the night of deception had given way to the first true moments of connection, and that the path ahead, though uncertain, held the promise of a relationship built on trust, honesty, and the undeniable spark that had begun to kindle between them. With the storm finally past and sunlight spilling across the wide ranch, both the rancher and the widow felt the weight of the night's events lift, leaving space for a tentative but promising new beginning. The widow, once guarded and wary of men who saw her as a challenge or a wager, now looked at him with a cautious openness, noticing the depth of sincerity in his eyes and the way his posture, once so full of arrogance, had softened into patience and respect. The rancher, in turn, saw her not as a prize or a secret to be unraveled, but as a partner of equal strength, intelligence, and courage, someone whose very presence challenged him to be better, to act with honesty and care rather than recklessness. They moved through the morning together in small, deliberate acts, preparing breakfast side by side, sharing stories and laughter, exchanging glances that spoke volumes without words, each moment reinforcing the fragile bridge of trust they were building. There was no rush, no pretense, only the quiet understanding that what had begun as a night of deception had become something far more meaningful, the first steps toward genuine companionship and mutual respect. As the day unfolded, the widow began to feel a sense of belonging she had long thought impossible, and the rancher discovered that the thrill he had once sought in wagers and bets could never compare to the steady, profound satisfaction of connection built on truth and vulnerability. The estate, once a symbol of his power and isolation, now seemed alive with possibility, a backdrop for a relationship forged in honesty and tempered by challenges overcome. By evening, as the sun dipped behind the distant hills and painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, they stood side by side on the porch, the silence between them comfortable, their hands brushing in a subtle acknowledgment of the bond they had formed. It was a moment of quiet triumph, proof that even deception and secrets could lead to understanding, growth, and love when met with sincerity and courage. In that serene golden light, both understood that the night of challenges and revelations had not ended their story, but had begun the truest chapter of all, a chapter in which trust, respect, and an undeniable spark of passion promised a shared future neither could have anticipated, yet both were now eager to embrace.